Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to use a template in Dreamweaver CS6. Now Dreamweaver has what they consider Dreamweaver templates, and those are a page where you can set up only certain regions to be editable. So you can lock down the site, only certain places are editable. I'm using template in a more general sense of just some basic code that you can work from. And so if you go into Dreamweaver and if you go down to more, you'll see this option down here where you'll see this blank page and a bunch of options. And so rather than use HTML template, because that's the Dreamweaver template document, I tend to avoid those. I just like under HTML page type, you have a lot of options here. And so you first have to decide where do you want basically your navigation. Do you want a top or a left or a right, etc. And also, do you want a fixed width or an elastic? But what I'm going to do is focus on actually the HTML5. They only give two options down here. I'm not sure why they don't give a few more, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a page with that. But before I create a site, I always like to create a site definition in Dreamweaver. So I'm going to do new site, and I'm going to call this HTML5 example. And in this case, I have to decide on my local computer where do I want to store my files, and on my desktop I actually have a folder already called HTML5 example, and within that I've created a folder for CSS and images. So I'm going to hit choose. Server, I'm not going to worry about it this time, so I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to hit OK. Alright, now that I've set up my site definition, I'm going to go back to more. I'm going to go down to HTML5, the two-column fixed. Now over here I have this option. Do I want to put my CSS in the head of the document, create a new file, link to existing? I actually want to create it in a new. I'm going to hit create. So this is where it wants me to name, and actually it sets up a name for me, but I tend to always rename it something that makes sense to me. And I always put it in my CSS folder. Some people like to have a folder called styles, whatever works for you. And just like that, I have this document set up. And if you spend some time actually reading the code, it tells you a lot of, it even says it's heavily commented. And so it actually could help you a lot if you spent some time actually reading through some of this, and it will explain how you can do certain things. The other thing, if you look at, I'm just going to delete some of this so we can tighten it up a little. If you actually look at the CSS, you'll see it's really commented out as well. And so the first thing you really should do is spend some time just reading over the comments and getting a good idea of how the page is set up. Because one of the hardest things with working with templates is understanding the thought process whoever created it, because often it's different than the way you might design your own pages from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do, the insert logo, I'm going to delete by selecting it. I'm going to keep my mouse there, and in my case I already have a banner image that I'm going to put in my HTML5 example folder. I'm going to drop it right in the images folder. And so the first thing I'm going to do before I start is I'm going to save this in my folder called index.html. And that's the way I always save my home page. I'm going to hit save. And now I'm going to insert that banner image. The banner image in my case I'm just going to use to set the color scheme for the rest of my site. I'm going to hit OK. And so this one's, the banner is more for a site that is based on a portfolio site, but you can see what it's looking like. And I can spend some time looking at, so there's a giant div container, and I know my picture is 900, my banner is 900 pixels wide, so I'm going to click on the div container, and I'm going to click this pencil. And 960 is a common width, but I'm going to actually just change that because of the way my banner is set up, and hit apply. So now I've set it up where it looks good right there. Alright, so moving on down, you'll notice that we got some issues down here, and it's due to the width. And so I can look at the article content, and I'm going to go ahead and change that to 700 for now. I'm going to hit apply and see what that looks like. Alright, that looks pretty good. So a few other things I'm going to do is, I tend to, down here, this footer, I always tend to have my footers be the smaller information at the bottom that aren't as important. And so you can see down here that it even has the background color here, but I'm going to actually just use the CSS panel And actually, when I'm looking at this, I can see that the way it's set up is they're going to actually add the style to the header, section, footer, etc. So let's actually, while I'm new to using this option here, let's see, and it worked just fine. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click footer, and I'm just going to tighten this up. And I tend to also like my footers to be a smaller font size. So I'm going to actually go down here, and we'll go to the bottom, and we'll say footer, font size, 9 pixels. We'll do color. I'll do a light gray and we'll see what that looks like, and closing bracket. Alright, so I'm going to save this and I'm going to preview, and you can see just like that I've started to create a site that's been pretty easy for the most part. The hardest part is just understanding when you start trying to adjust the CSS, understanding what's changing each part. So there's this little green line here, which if it bothered me I could get rid of. It could be just change colors and actually have a styling effect, so I could try to make it an orange. There's this different little color here. I like for the most part the way that my footer looks. I might try to align it a little better. And then there's some spacing things with, using the design principles of CARP, contrast, alignment, repetition, proximity. I might try to decrease the white space here and try to chunk it a little tighter. But other than that, it's pretty close. So we're just going to spend a couple more minutes on this and then be done. So if I click on this, I can start seeing, so that's the sidebar. And there, so I'm going to first click the sidebar, and I'm going to click the pencil and see what we have set up here. So the background, so I'm going to change that background to white. We're just going to actually hit apply, hit OK. And in my case, I know I don't want to use any of the text there. There's also this other aside. I'm just going to delete. I'm not going to use that. And so in this case, I'm going to delete one of these because I know I don't want all of this. So these are just different sections. Okay, so here's 2, so this works pretty good. So right now I can look at this. They've added properties. Let's make some space here. So if I actually look down here, I could see that these have been applied to all the headings and the paragraph. In my case, I tend to often like to differentiate how I do that. So I'm going to find those heading tags. And here they are, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do H1, H2, and typically on especially a small site like something I'm doing right now, I tend to not use anything more than those 2. And so I'm just going to delete these comments right now just to show you what I'm doing. I'm going to copy that under H1. Copy that under H2, and be careful because all it takes is removing one of these semicolons and this isn't going to work. So I'm going to make that just a paragraph, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a couple things. First thing I'm going to do is font size. So my H1 I'm going to make 28 pixels, and then I will do my H2, we'll say 20 pixels, and we'll see what that looks like. So I want a good differentiation where there's a difference in size. The next thing I like to do is to try to work on that white space issue is padding top 0 pixels. Actually, padding bottom. Margin. And so you can see just like that, it tightened it up there, tightened it up there. And I could play with trying to get it a little more, but you can already see it. It's working pretty good. So I'm going to first add a title to this, which I usually do right away. I'm going to save it and preview it. And just like that, created a basic site. There's that bar again, so I could play with that. And one way that I could probably do it, and sometimes you can just get stuck in this. So there's the header. And so I could see the header, is there actually a background to this? And right now it's looking like it's not. And so the other option I'd be able to do is, so there's this green ADB, so I can start finding out, well, where is that? Alright, so there's the header background color that's causing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete that, and that should fix that little problem. And it did. And so there's a little bit of space there, so if I wanted to play with that, right now I'm going to leave it. I think this is fine. And so my next steps would be to actually create the rest of my site. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a page called Home. Oops. And you got to be careful. See? Artifacts. And so it's being weird about where I put my mouse. So see, and right now I can already see it kind of behaving a little differently. And so I could go back through here, and right now it's actually, let's show you a couple things here. So you see it's using this mouse over, and so you could always just get rid of that effect. Alright, so let's say that's what I'm going to do in this. I'm going to delete this and just see what a 3-page layout. Okay, works pretty good. I could play around with tinkering a little more, but right now I know I'm going to name my home page is already called index.html. I'm going to call my artifacts page artifacts.html, lowercase, no spaces in your names. Resume.html. Before I continue, I'm going to change the links. Okay, so my home page. Now I'm going to do a file save as artifacts. Okay, now I'm going to do one more, save as resume. Okay, so just like that, I've created a basic site where you click on Home, Artifacts, Resume, in really a matter of minutes. I think it's been 10-15 minutes, just like that, using one of Dreamweaver's bits of code. I call it a template. I think they just call it HTML page that's set up. So with that, have fun, experiment with some of the Dreamweaver options, because sometimes while there are a lot of great CSS templates out there, sometimes it's easier just to use with something that's a little more basic in Dreamweaver and doing the basic things that you need. Thanks.